Welcome. My name is Erik Stensland. I'm a landscape photographer based here in Estes Park, Colorado. In this video series, my aim is to help you take your photography to the next level. I think we've all been out in majestic landscapes with soaring mountains or beautiful oceans or out in meadows, and we've taken images that we hoped would capture something of what we felt and what we saw. But when we get home and look at them, they look nothing like what we experienced. And in this video series, I want to take you step by step through a process of helping you to capture images that truly reflect the emotions that you felt and the images that you saw. In this first part of that series, we're going to discuss equipment. Now, many people believe that equipment is the most important aspect of photography. And I'm going to begin by actually debunking something of that myth. I have people come into my gallery probably 3 to 4 times a week that will look at my photos and they'll ooh and they'll awe and say, wow, these are amazing. What kind of a camera do you have? Others will be so blunt as to say, if I had the same camera you had, I could take these same pictures. Well, a camera is helpful, and it's absolutely necessary, in fact, to get photos. But the camera isn't as important as people think. I like to compare the camera to a paintbrush. And I have many friends who are artists, and they paint beautiful landscapes. And we share a lot of information and learn from each other. But one of the things that you quickly learn is that if I was to go out and buy the most expensive paintbrush that they're selling, I guarantee I wouldn't be able to paint anything like they're able to paint. Now, buying the most expensive brush would have a lot of benefits to it. It would, the bristles would stay in line when I went down. I wouldn't lose bristles into the painting. There are benefits, but it doesn't help me to paint. And in the same way, having expensive photography gear is not going to help you make great photographs. In fact, a lot can be done without spending much money at all. Quite often, while I'm out in the field, I'll run into photographers and they will have gear that costs $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. And I'll be amazed at what they have. And then I say, can I see your photos? And they'll show me some of their pictures. And I'm always quite surprised that so many of these guys who have the expensive equipment have photos that look like they were taken on a cell phone. And equipment does not equal quality. And so what I want to do is begin to talk about photography gear and show you how you can begin to make quality photos with very little photography gear. And let's begin by first looking at the whole idea of the camera. I use this little camera here, and it's a fairly nice camera. But the important thing for you getting started into photography is that you have a camera which is digital and an SLR. And when I say digital, the reason I suggest a digital camera, first, there isn't a whole lot of other option out there today. But probably more important is that a digital camera will provide you with instant feedback, both in terms of your composition and in terms of your exposure. You can quickly see if you've made a mistake and make an adjustment there in the field. Whereas in the old days, you would have to get the film processed, get home and look at it, and then try and remember what was I doing and what did I do wrong. Whereas nowadays, with the digital, you can get the feedback immediately. The other thing I mentioned was getting an SLR. And what I mean by that is a camera that you can change lenses with. The reason I suggest this type of a camera is because these cameras enable you to have full control over what you shoot. You're able to control exactly what the exposure is. You're able to control what your white balance is. You're able to control every aspect of your photo. And the reason this is important is because quite often when you're out in the field and you're taking a photograph, the camera will make certain assumptions about what it's seeing, and you'll end up with something a little different than what you anticipated. And operating these cameras is really not all that difficult. We'll talk about that as we go through this series. But by having an SLR digital camera, you're in complete control. Now, many people think that what's needed is to have an expensive, fancy, top-of-the-line digital camera. Well, truthfully, for about 200 bucks, you can get a fabulous SLR camera that will meet your needs. Now, yes, there are differences between the bottom-of-the-line digital SLR cameras and the top-of-the-line. But for me, it all boils down to how large do I want to print the image. Generally, I'm trying to print very large, doing large images like this. And so I need the maximum resolution. I need the top of the line. But most people aren't doing that. Most people are content with much smaller images. And if you're printing anything under 3 feet in size, you can get away with a 6-megapixel camera and be just fine. Let me show you a few examples of some different images. And you tell me which of these is better. Here we have a photograph that I took up on Bear Lake on one cold January morning. And this was taken with a 4-megapixel camera. And I think it's still a fairly decent image. And truthfully, I've printed this image in my gallery, had it on display and sold it at over 3 feet in diameter. And this is from a 4-megapixel camera. Then we went up to a 6-megapixel camera. And, you know, there is increased resolution. But at this size, you really can't tell any difference. Here's one taken with a 12-megapixel full-frame sensor camera. Again, a very nice image, but there's no difference in terms of the quality. And the same is true. Here's a 21-megapixel image taken last week. And then here's a 4x5 image taken with an old wooden field camera with a cover over my head, a 4-inch by 5-inch sheet of film. I can print this image at up to 40 by 60 inches, and it looks fabulous. Every leaf shows. But at this size, there's no difference between this image and the 4-megapixel image. And so the camera manufacturers and other equipment manufacturers try and convince you that if you have the latest and greatest, you're going to come away with something amazing. But that's not the case. You can do great images even with the cheapest of cameras. And I recommend starting with the digital SLR in either the Canon or Nikon series. And the reason for this is because both of those companies are quite strong. They're likely to be around for many years, and their equipment is easy to find and to get parts for. They have good repair policies. And so look on eBay or look on Amazon and get a used digital SLR, 6 megapixels or larger, and you can do anything that I will show you in this series.